On a summer day in 1876, a battle erupted that would echo through history, not just because of its fierce violence, but because its story was told from a voice too long silenced. Lieutenant Colonel George Custer's arrival at Little Bighorn set into motion an epic clash, but it was Chief Gall, a warrior shaped by hardship and loss, who would reveal the truths often buried beneath the legends. This is the story of a fight seen through Gall's eyes, one of bravery, heartbreak, and a battle that changed the course of a nation forever. When Lieutenant Colonel George Custer reached the Little Bighorn, Chief Gall and his people had only a few hours' notice. A battle-hardened warrior at 36, Gall had experienced many fights. He had defeated American soldiers and rival warriors, earning his reputation as one of the finest warriors among the Hunkpapa Sioux. Gall's importance to his people was so great that Chief Sitting Bull adopted him as a younger brother and included him among his closest advisors and friends. So, when news of Custer's arrival reached Sitting Bull's camp, Gall was among the first to learn about it. He had no inkling this battle would be unprecedented. This day became a memory he would recount for the rest of his life. Chief Gall was one of the earliest Native Americans to share the battle's story from their perspective, and his account would reshape the narrative of the Little Bighorn and Custer's last moments. On the morning of June 25, 1876, Sioux scouts discovered ration crates a few miles from the village, dropped by Custer's troops. American soldiers spotted the scouts and drove them off, but Custer knew they would return to alert Sitting Bull of his presence. Feeling he had no option, Custer decided to strike swiftly before Sitting Bull could flee. The Sioux scouts did indeed return with word of approaching American soldiers. Sitting Bull dispatched scouts to monitor their movements while convening a council to decide their response. American soldiers like Sergeant Daniel Knipe reported seeing these scouts on nearby hills as they advanced. The scouts soon reported that the Americans had divided their forces, although their strategy was still unclear. In reality, Custer took 5 companies to flank the village from the north over the bluffs. A second group of 3 companies under Major Marcus Reno was to attack from the south, unknown to Gall at the time. A third detachment of 3 companies led by Captain Frederick Benteen planned to cross the river far south and close in from the west. The American plan aimed to cut off all escape routes. Sitting Bull and other native leaders agreed the best course was to break camp and flee before the attack, but underestimated the cavalry's speed. Before they could move, Reno's men were seen crossing the river and charging into the woods towards the village. Sitting Bull and I were at the point where Reno attacked, Gall later recalled. Their Hunkpapa Sioux section was on the southern edge, directly in Reno's path. Gunfire broke out, bullets ripping through tents and scattering residents inside. Warriors scrambled for their horses, while women and children fled southward, away from Reno's men. Gall's first thought was for his family. He rushed to find his 2 wives and 3 children amid the chaos. Tragically, he found them quickly. Whether Reno's men had deliberately targeted Gall's family or they were caught in crossfire is uncertain. Gall's 2 wives and 3 children were dead when he found them, killed by the white soldiers, and it broke his heart. For Sioux, this described grief, despair, and burning rage. Afterward, Gall said he killed all his enemies with the hatchet, a Sioux metaphor meaning to abandon firearms for hand-to-hand combat. It was the choice of a warrior consumed by rage, focused on making his enemies suffer more than worrying about his own survival. The cost the Americans would pay for killing Gall's family would be enormous. Reno's men had tied their horses in the woods nearby and advanced on foot. They formed a line and fired into the camp. Gall joined the fight against this assault. Although Sitting Bull is best known for the battle, he did not actually fight. Instead, Sitting Bull stayed in camp, making medicine, spiritual power intended to strengthen warriors and secure victory. The fighting leaders were men like Gall and the Oglala Sioux warrior Crazy Horse. The Sioux fought Reno's men with a mix of gunfire and mounted charges. It soon became clear the Americans were outnumbered. Reno's force had only about 150 men against hundreds of Sioux warriors rushing to defend, with more arriving steadily. Among Reno's soldiers were a few Native American scouts from the Crow and Arikara tribes, enemies of the Sioux, who were specifically targeted by the Sioux warriors. This included Custer's chief scout and friend, Bloody Knife. Bloody Knife was half Arikara and half Hunkpapa Sioux, like Gall and Sitting Bull. Gall and Bloody Knife had grown up together but hated each other deeply. Gall distrusted Bloody Knife because of his partial Arikara heritage, which led Bloody Knife to leave the tribe and join the Americans. The two men became deadly enemies, with Gall eventually attacking and killing Bloody Knife's brothers and one of his sons. Bloody Knife was mounted beside Major Reno during the battle when he was suddenly shot through the head. Since Gall lacked a rifle at the time, it is known he wasn't the one who fired, but another Sioux warrior must have recognized Bloody Knife and took him down for Gall. Bloody Knife's death right before Reno's eyes unnerved the major and was the final trigger that made him order the retreat. Reno's men began withdrawing into the woods where their horses were tied, then attempted to flee back across the river. The retreat became chaotic, and Gall, alongside other Sioux, seized on their enemy's panic, chasing them down, dragging men from their horses to hack them or shooting them as they fled. At least 32 Americans fell before the survivors managed to reach safety on the far side hills. Gall wanted to continue the pursuit, but the terrified cries of fellow Sioux stopped them. Another American force was preparing to attack from the south. If that force broke into the village, the women and children would be taken, ending the fight. According to Gall, what followed differed drastically from public perception. Gall rushed north with 3 warriors to confront Custer's advance. His account differs from most others. He claimed to lead a small scouting party along the east bluffs to track Custer's approach closely. Gall said they stopped about 600 yards from Custer's troops, observing and estimating his next move. An officer rode ahead, scouting the path with binoculars. Custer, having cut his famous long golden hair short for the fight, went unrecognized as the Long Hair by Gall at the time. He realized later who he had seen. Gall said no one in the Sioux camp knew it was Custer on that battlefield, unable to distinguish him from any other man. Gall's story tells that Custer hesitated upon seeing the village, waiting for his command to regroup. Gall believed this was the moment Custer realized he had underestimated the challenge. In Gall's view, the Native Americans struck first, charging as Custer crossed the bluffs about 3/4 of a mile from the river. It was Gall and his warriors who moved first, not Custer. Others, like Sioux warrior Lazy White Bull, said Custer's attack began almost immediately after Reno was driven back. Gall likely mistook the timing. Cheyenne warriors fought Custer's men back by the time he arrived, so Gall probably saw Custer's forces in retreat rather than attack. The chaotic retreat was marked by falling bodies every few meters, desperate fighting, and jammed Springfield carbines that many soldiers abandoned for revolvers. Gall claimed many Americans ran out of ammo mid-fight and were easily slain by warriors like himself with only hatchets. The Native Americans used every tactic to disrupt the Americans, including using blankets and loud shouts to spook loose horses into the American lines, causing mounts to bolt. This panic among the horses robbed the Americans of their best chances to escape. It was a slaughter, Gall admitted. We took no prisoners. Our hearts were bad, and we cut and shot them all to pieces. The same brutal fate would soon befall Custer. According to Gall, Custer's remaining men were driven back toward the top of the bluffs, splitting into at least 2 groups. Companies C, E, and F stayed with Custer and his brother Tom, retreating to what is now called Custer Hill. Gall did not witness Custer's last moments and, unlike many other warriors, never claimed to have slain the famous Long Hair. Gall also believed Custer's group was not the last to fall. He said other warriors pursued Custer's men to the hilltop, where they surrounded and swiftly killed them. According to Gall, the actual last stand was southeast of Custer Hill, where Lieutenant James Calhoun's L Company and Captain Miles Cogg's I Company retreated after splitting off. Calhoun's men fought dismounted to the last man when surrounded. Captain Cogg's men tried to link up with Custer along Battle Ridge, but were overwhelmed after Cogg was shot from his horse. Their bodies were found piled together, having fought fiercely till the end. Gall said Custer's men fought strong, but their courage could not save them. The Custer fight lasted less than an hour, but the battle continued. Gall then turned south to finish off Reno and avenge his family. Reno's men had fallen back to a hill southeast and awaited reinforcements from Captain Benteen and the pack train, arriving around 4 p.m. Together, the remaining 7 companies of the 7th Cavalry began moving toward Custer's last known position, but Gall confirmed Custer's men were already dead by then. After defeating Custer, the Sioux and Cheyenne turned to finish Reno. As they rode over the bluffs, the Americans spotted them and retreated to their hill, digging in for defense. Reno and Benteen's force of over 400 established a defensive circle known as Reno Hill. Native warriors charged repeatedly that evening but could not break through before nightfall. Gall and Crazy Horse ordered attacks to cease overnight to avoid unnecessary deaths. Instead, snipers kept the Americans awake. They believed time and thirst would weaken the soldiers, saying, "They will fall into our hands when the thirst burns in their throats and makes them mad for a drink." The water shortage was severe. By morning of June 26th, the Americans had no water left. Gall posted snipers to attack water-fetching parties at the ravine. Eventually, American marksmen secured a safe route, earning several medals of honor. In the afternoon, Sioux scouts spotted dust from approaching relief forces led by Generals Alfred Terry and John Gibbon. Gall called this the Big Dust, a sign to cease the attack. The Native Americans broke camp and hurriedly moved west toward the Bighorn Mountains. It was a great Sioux victory, but not lasting. The U.S. resumed campaigns against the Sioux in following months, forcing surrender. Gall, Sitting Bull, and many others fled north to Canada. Gall and Sitting Bull eventually parted ways, with Gall deciding to lead his followers back into U.S. territory. He settled at the Standing Rock Reservation, where he converted to Christianity and developed a friendship with the American officials managing the reservation. In 1886, they persuaded Gall to attend the 10th anniversary ceremony of the Little Bighorn Battle. Gall's attendance was unexpected, but welcomed, providing him a chance to meet surviving soldiers from the battle. Until then, the American public had only heard the battle story from the soldiers' perspective. At this event, Gall offered one of the first accounts from the Native American side, using a combination of Lakota, English, and sign language to share his story and respond to questions from Americans. Multiple versions of Gall's story exist from various sources. The version followed here was published on June 26, 1886, in Chicago. However, a month later, the St. Paul Pioneer Press published another account with significant differences, such as placing Gall at the north end of the village initially and not fighting Reno's men, only Custer's. Another 1890 account had Gall involved in both fights, but did not mention his family's death. Whether Gall altered his story for different audiences or interviewers misunderstood or distorted his words remains a topic of historical debate for nearly 140 years. Regardless of which version one believes, Gall's account represents a rare and valuable effort by the American media at the time to hear from the other side of such a historic battle. Despite discrepancies, his testimony is crucial for a fuller understanding of the Battle of Little Bighorn.